Oh,
okay,
now
it's live. Now it's live. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Hello.
Now we're live.
Hi.
So I guess welcome to a special live edition of Conversations in Sci-Fi. I'm Brad Wright. The handsomer of the two gentlemen with me is Laurence Moroney, who is also the.
Saw that coming a mile away.
Sorry, David.
I was on tenterhooks. Which one?
Laurence
Thank you, Brad.
is the lead AI advocate for Google, and is clearly the smartest person we will be talking today. And the other person needs no introduction. So Laurence, no, I'm kidding. This is David Hewlett, star of Stargate. He was in all three of our Stargate series, and has been in a million other things, including
and weaseled my way into this thing too.
Academy Award-winning turn. Yeah.
Yeah, I take all the credit for that.
Yeah, well, you should.
Might I say, I love David as the cranky next door neighbor in Planet of the Apes. I mean, that was my favorite role.
It took my finger. There you go. Yeah. I remember watching that on a plane.
Who caused the destruction of humanity, too?
That's it. I was on a plane as I watched myself get on a plane to spread the virus. That was kind of fun. Mm. Yeah.
That probably wasn't even in the script. That was an ad lib, right? And then you just took it from there and wiped out humanity.
Yeah, they rolled.
You could make another movie.
What if I destroyed the planet?
That was good.
Yeah.
So
I'm here to keep things on track.
Just a little introduction Just want to do a little introduction as to why we're here. Obviously, I want to keep Stargate alive in the world and in the mind of the public. And my friends at the Companion, who are hosting this lovely gathering, asked me if we could do a read-through at some point of a Stargate script. And Joe Malazzi and I were discussing it, and I said, well, it can't be an old script. It should be something new. And it couldn't be something new yet because, well, there's a lot going on between Amazon and MGM, and a lot of changes happening there. So I had this idea. I said, what if we got an AI? Because I love AI. I mean, Travelers was all about AI, and it's I think very much in the forefront of culture and of science, everything that's going on right now. Yeah. And I said, what if an AI wrote a script and we got some famous Stargate actors to perform it? And
you got me instead.
And they said, yeah, it was a good idea. So I said famous, but you're here. And they thought that would be a fun idea. And then they thought, well, where are we going to find the AI who would do this? And I said, listen, if we put it out there, I bet somebody is going to raise their hand. Enter Laurence Moroney, who said in a tweet, if only you knew a guy who could do exactly what you're asking. And talk about immensely qualified. So to actually, now that is the start, Laurence. Why don't you talk a little bit about where you took it from there, where you jumped in?
Yeah. So thanks, and I was so happy when I can tweet "pick me," and you did, and you responded right away. So that was really cool. And I think one of the things to me that made me kind of excited about the project is that a lot of my job is working with people to let them know what AI is and also what AI is not. And, we're all sci-fi fans. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. You can see like various paraphernalia around me, and I've worked with Stargate before. And, it was like, I would love to be able to work with the sci-fi audience to kind of help the sci-fi audience understand, like, this is what we might think AI is, but here's what it actually is. And when you can like work with what something actually is and you break through that hype cycle, that's when you can start getting like really productive and doing fun things with it. So it was like, here's the perfect opportunity, instead of like us thinking about all these giant language models and thinking that they might be able to like write a script or anything like that, to get something much smaller and much more focused And there's like so much material out there in the case in like Stargate scripts from the 3 different shows. And then there's so much dialogue like spoken by people like David when he's acting as McKay. Shall I say McKay or McKay? I love both. And, you know,
that was McKay. This will be McKay, right?
Yeah, the next generation of McKay will be McKay, right? And, you know, and then so like, you know, to start like really building something that could be built by anybody and to start showing like folks who are interested in this kind of thing that when you focus on the small and you understand the limitations, that's when you can start getting really creative. And so that's when I really wanted to get involved in this project so that, you know, instead of like, you know, a lot of people tend to see AI either as something scary or as something where it's a magic pixie dust that will solve all of your problems. And the truth is that it's like really somewhere in between. And so this to me was a perfect opportunity to work with you guys on something that I love, as well as to be able to do my job. So to me, it was the perfect low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, the AI stuff just blows me away. I just absolutely love it. There's just something about it. I mean, something I've learned from your tutorials and stuff is more that it doesn't seem to be about AI. It's more about machine learning. It's like it's not this sort of this like giant brain somewhere sorting stuff out. It's just break it down into little tiny pieces. It's fascinating. And I'm dealing with a bunch of kids now with my Tech Bandit stuff. So this is something that they are all going to be dealing with, or are already dealing with algorithms and stuff with their basic social media stuff. So I think the more we know about it, the better. Certainly even just from a parenting standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And same with me and my kids. I've been bringing them up with this stuff, and you know they're working.
How old are the kids?
23 and 20.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so they're
you made them. They got that far. Damn it!
Despite me. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, one of the things I love to zero in on is like when we talk about artificial intelligence, we tend to use that as like a singular phrase. But like if we break that apart a little bit and we think, okay, intelligence. What is intelligence? And there's so many definitions. Yeah, there's so many definitions out there, and there's so many ways of measuring it and quantizing it. But my favorite is there's a writer, Michio Kaku. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
You know, and he defined intelligence as how far you can see into the future. And at first, you kind of scratch your head and like, really? But when you think about it a bit, like for example, gaming. When people who are really smart at chess are the ones who are looking way ahead down the board and evaluating all the combinations. And we wrote with DeepMind, we wrote like a thing that beat the world champion at Go because it's able to look further into the future than the Go world champion was able to do.
Oh wow!
And so then, if we bring that back to writing, now it's a case of if you think about like if you're writing a script, the present is a blank page, the future is a page with words on it, right? So the intelligence part of it is how do we kind of predict that future? And so then the artificial side of that then becomes, well, how do I engineer a system that can predict the future? And, so for example, if it's a game, it does look ahead for chess or Go or those kind of things. And if it's writing, then it's a case of, well, how do I predict the future of like a page with words on it instead of an empty page? And the only way that I can do that is then look at previous words, right? And look at the patterns that are present in previous words and to try and construct new sentences and new phrasings based off of the previous ones to fill up a page with them. And that's to me is like, a great writer like Brad, and I'm not just saying that because you're here, Brad, but it's one of the things that it can never really replace a real writer because a real writer doesn't predict the future. They create the future. They figure out, I want this story to go this particular way. And I know these people are here and, I'm going to create some foreshadowing and some surprises and all of that kind of thing. And it's like, that's what a real intelligence will do.
But it's still based on Brad's existing knowledge and existing experiences as a writer and as a reader and this stuff, is it not? I mean, how much of that sounds familiar to you, Brad, when you talk about how the AI is creating the scripts?
Well, I mean, in a way, that's what we're planning. A writer plans the future. A writer plans the future for their characters on the page because they don't know necessarily what's going to happen next. So that's kind of interesting. I never intended this as sort of an experiment, knowing where AI actually is, to say that AI could write a script just as good as a person. But I do think it's where it is now, and where Laurence is taking it. is really fascinating and very informative as to what character is and what the nature of character is, because it's reflecting what's there, right? And reflecting it in ways that that I would have never thought of. So
it's making connections that perhaps you might not have made yourself
in a million years, and because it doesn't have the same filters, it doesn't have anywhere near the same filters, and it makes it very interesting. It's sometimes quite funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, there was yeah.
I have to say, I immediately thought of you for this project because
so did I.
Of course you did, because this is the energy you bring. That you have this association with this group of people. It's exactly up your alley, and yet it did not stop you from trying to audition for it. Of course you're in. But my God, you gave us 2 auditions online. We have to show them.
Yeah. They're brilliant.
The Blade Runner piece. Now I'm giving it away. The audience will completely know. Tommy, can we roll that? Is that possible? Tommy with a companion. I'm hoping he can run that for us.
Yeah.
My name is David Hewlett. I am 6'2". I'm reading for the role of McKay I, and today I want to do this was my favorite. It's my favorite scene in science fiction. This is the death on the rooftop of the seminal film Blade Runner. Okay. Can we just?
You struggling with that?
Yeah, we'll get started.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, does that look right? How much of me are you seeing here? Are you seeing?
Above the nipples,
So if I tense up it, how's that? Does that look muscly?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone want to see that. But
okay, how's that? Do you see the bird now?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
is that a puffin?
It is, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Normally I think it's a pigeon. I figure it's a bird. Yeah, it's a symbolic of the bird.
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you see my hand? No.
Not really. Sort
of. Great.
Bit,
okay, so that's.
Yeah, you should be fine. You should be fine.
Okay, ready? Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, ready? I've seen things with these eyes humans can only dream of. That's really cool. I've seen attack ships on fire, like the ships in Hewlett. Beams dancing in the Dan Hauser gate. All of these moments will be lost when I'm gone.
You good? Fly?
What? I mean, it's not actually. It was supposed to be a pigeon or a dove or something.
How could I not say yes?
What doesn't scream highly intelligent computer to you more than that?
That has to go down as the best audition of all time.
Not enough actors bring a spritzer.
I gotta say, I'm impressed with my son's straight man off camera. That time I watched it, I was like, he's got a pretty good, like, he doesn't break on that.
Yeah.
He's not acting. He's not allowed to. I've told him he's not allowed to. There's only room for one actor in this family, and it's me.
Well, that was quite the audition. I have to say, that was spot on.
It's important to commit. Laurence, you got to commit to these things, you know.
Absolutely. And I noticed one thing between all the different auditions, that your height was different.
Oh, you noticed that? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
Baz said that. Baz was like, "How tall are you?" He said, "I don't." I said, "Who knows?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I know. I was once mocked at an audition for saying that I was 5'9.5", and so I've always been incredibly like self-conscious of saying 5'9.5" now. So I thought in this one I would just like basically every time I did a new take, I would just change my height. You know, until I'm actually now, I think I'm now taller than Jason at this point. Yeah, so.
And the audition that got you in was the one where you were the tallest. So I think there's a bit of height there. Like, yeah. So
apparently, I bet you if you ran that through your machine learning model, that you'd see that a lot of big actors are in fact quite tall. Like they are imposing figures in life as well as on camera. Not all the time, obviously, because of me, but yeah. But it's funny, just going back to what you were saying about the AI stuff. Something that I've noticed, and I actually use Stargate as an example for it, is that people will look at stuff, the early days of these things, and go like, it's never gonna, look at that, it's terrible, it's never gonna work. And I always come back to Stargate and HD, where everyone was like, oh, film, you could never replace film. Film is like, you never gets the real, this, that. And of course, within 5-10 years, the film is now an anomaly only peculiar people like Nolan can use. You know what I mean?
Good call.
That the technology just it improves so much faster once it started, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
They started playing with it, and you must be seeing just huge jumps and strides with the AI stuff now.
Yeah, and that's generally it. And I think the same thing.
We should talk about. I just want you to talk a little bit more about your approach to this and how you did it.
Yeah, happy to. So I think the first thing was that we started like just looking at how do we get the data from the scripts, right? And how do we kind of evaluate things like when somebody speaks to McKay, how does McKay respond? And it ended up being like writing a lot of plumbing code and that kind of stuff for it. And we were getting nowhere. We kind of failed fast with that one. So one of the things that we ended up deciding to do then was to say, well, what if we can create a new language to structure screenplays? And so that, and make them much more easily machine readable. And then once we did that, then suddenly that like unblocked a logjam so that we could start training lots of models. And so like we got all of the screenplays from Atlantis and from SG-1, and we kind of put them into these format. I haven't done Universe yet. I promise I will add it, but and I put them into this format, and then it became very easy for me to run a piece of code that says, give me every line of McKay dialogue and give me every line that preceded that. And then there's a model there's a model architecture called a transformer, not to be confused with robots in disguise. And the idea of a transformer is it allows you to say, well, when a sequence of text looks like this, then you can do a sequence to sequence type thing. And then that was perfect for this. And that's often used for machine translation, right? Because in the past, machine translation used to be translate word for word, but then phrases didn't translate very nicely. Right. And but then if a sequence of words that means one thing in English and there's a sequence of words in French or Portuguese, where the words may be placed differently in the sequence, but the English sequence predicts the Portuguese sequence. There's an architecture like that with something that's called attention in it. So you can attention to words in their places. So I had started adapting like some code that was out there that was actually built for building machine translation. And said, well, what if we have a sequence of English words that are spoken by another character and a sequence of English words that are spoken by McKay, or vice versa. When McKay says something, how does the other character react? And like start predicting, and start predicting those sequences to sequences, and then start like saying, okay, I'm going to get two characters and models for these two characters, and I'm going to have like character one will say something. How does McKay respond? And then McKay says that thing. How does the other character respond? And then also then within a script, you generally have like a scene heading, and then there's like an action description, and then there's characters. And like, how does a character respond to an action description, like in the script? So for example, there might be an explosion, and like, how would McKay respond to an explosion? Or how would, Teal'c respond to an explosion? McKay might be going like, oh my God! Where Teal'c might be just.
I was actually going to say they'd probably be quite a similar response. I thought, both with heroic bravery. I would imagine. Yeah,
maybe. Yeah. So, but then we could start like training with things like that to start saying, okay, well, if I have action descriptions now, if I write an action description, how does like McKay respond to that? How does another character respond to that? And the little script that you're going to read through today, like you'll notice the last part of it, no spoilers, but the last part of it has an action description, and then there's a character responds to that action description in a way that kind of made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. You know the one I mean. And viewers are just going to have to keep watching, and and so that's generally how this has been constructed.
Oh my God, that's true. It built a cliffhanger, didn't it? It actually built a cliffhanger in the scene. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and so the idea is like we have this cluster of models that I've trained. You know, like so, how does McKay react to dialogue? How does McKay react to action? You know, how does another character react to dialogue and action? Or if McKay says something, how does the action follow that? Right? You know, so if McKay just says, "I'm going to push this button," you know, if you've ever said something like that in the show, what would the following action description look like? So doing all of these
transitions. That's usually how that's how the episodes usually start.
Yeah, you know, so I mean, right now, so I have all these models, and I'm kind of doing a little bit of a manual process, kind of linking them all together. I liken myself to McKay at the back of a puddle jumper with all the pieces around and like trying to, you know, like push that button, and then, you know, so that's one of the improvements that we're working on, is to maybe make a little bit more automated orchestration.
Do you get to yell and mock and deride people as well, though? You gotta get that in there. You really got to get that in there. I mean, important part of it, yeah.
Well, one thing I haven't put in, and Brad taught me this word because I used to call it parenthetical, and he was like, "Don't you mean parenthetical?" Did I say that right this time, Brad? And
parenthetical.
Parentheticals, and because like I got it right, yay! So I haven't gotten them into the scripts yet, but like that would be one of the things. Is like, you know, so okay, when somebody says something to McKay might answer with words, but what would the parenthetical be? Is he being sarcastic? Is he shouting? Is he laughing? And, you know, that's one future improvement that we're working on, you know, just to make your job even harder.
Did you guys use a lot of parentheticals? I don't remember. Was there a lot of that in this? I don't remember a lot of them in your scripts.
No, yes. I mean, the truth is a good script shouldn't have too many anyway, because the line shouldn't be cryptic as to whether or not the actor is expressing the given emotion that is in the parenthetical. But sometimes you have to do it just to make it very clear. Stabbing motion. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure Psycho had stabbing her.
Yeah.
In the
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like I saw one common one in the scripts when I was extracting stuff was like on the phone. Right. So you want to instruct the characters on the phone, that kind of stuff. And it'd be kind of interesting to start throwing things like that in, like, you know, when McKay talks like this, when McKay is on the phone, maybe he speaks differently than when he's talking to a person face to face.
Or even the other ones that are always weird are the off camera, on camera ones where you're recording, basically doing two scenes at the same time. And they're having a conversation as if they're in the same room, but the reality is they're actually on, you know, some kind of like communications device of some sort.
I use it if it says if I want the character to be like they're alone and I want them to be saying it to themselves, so sotto voce or to themselves, something like that.
Yes. So they're not monologuing.
It's something that you could put. I'm sure the AI. Yeah. And actors hardly ever read the parentheticals or do what it says anyway.
Or the actions.
Laughing hysterically is one that I. Yes, exactly. Really, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's just my favorite. There's a great Jerry Lewis quote. As when he directed a lot, and he said,
I read his book on directing.
Mr. Lewis, somebody asked a question. Yeah, he's good. I mean, he's quite accomplished at least. And he said, a reporter asked Mr. Lewis, "Do you want a writer to describe locations and actions and things that the actor should be doing?" And he said, "Of course, they're the writer. They should definitely have input into that." And the reporter said, "Do you ever do them?" And he said, "Hell no. No writer's going to tell me where I put my camera." So it's sort of a combination of those two.
Right.
So
throw that out there
Laurence,
as a suggestion.
do you feel you've spoken enough about the technology of this?
So yeah, I mean, I guess just one thing that I would add is all of the technology that was used to do this is open source and free. And so I use a thing called TensorFlow, which is a framework that I work on at Google. And then for training these, there's these supercomputers called TPUs, tensor processing units, which are machines that we've built that are specifically for training machine learning models. And there's a thing called Colab. So I'm going to blog about all of this after this as we lead up to future things, and maybe share with folks to learn how they can do this themselves. But if you use this, cool. Well, if you use this product called Colab, that actually allows you access to TPUs in the cloud for free. And so, you know, we were able to do it that way. It's like, this isn't a big multi-million-dollar project. We were able to kind of put these things together with stuff that's freely available, and hoping others can replicate in time.
What David is about to read is not written by some super massive mega computer. It is open source stuff composed by a cluster of computers, smaller computers with open source software, not some giant underground bunker machine. In fact, something that, and you're saying something anyone could do. You mean somebody with your skill set could do?
Oh, yeah, but I mean, part of my job is I train people to have those skill sets, and it's surprisingly easy.
Your tutorials are fantastic on this stuff. Like they really are. They literally walking people through like a hello world to the point where you're actually examining images and such. It's very cool.
The first thing I ever did with text generation was I did one that generated Irish drinking songs, and some of the stuff it came up with was just mind blowing. And so and that's in the tutorials that David's referring to. When you go through those for text generation, you can actually learn how to build a machine learning model that can do Irish drinking songs. And
that's great.
If you have just a little bit of programming knowledge in a language called Python, you can pick this stuff up. And what I'm really excited about is what I call democratizing AI, so that if we can widen access to being able to build this stuff to as many people as possible, then it's not in the hands of a precious few who can make billions off of it. And also the kind of the fears that are out there that are mainly rooted in ignorance about it. The more people who know how to do this, and the more people who are able to build these kind of stuff and have fun with it, I think the better. So that's why I love the stuff that David's doing as well with his all this tech and his robots and that in the background, and how he's trying to widen access to children, to be able to learn these things.
Well, and open source is so important for this stuff too, because as soon as you get into a situation where you've got to pay for any kind of software or whatever, it makes it automatically it moves the group of people who are going to learn that to the people who can afford it, and that's what you're just trying to avoid with a lot of this stuff. So
I'll do the action descriptions and stage directions, and then you take over.
Here we go.
All right. So we ready to go?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so int Atlantis corridor. As McKay and Carter walk down the corridor, San Francisco is visible through the windows.
McKay. That is the understatement of the year. Carter. How do we do that? McKay. Well, there's no switch to the small-rization. Carter. Oh, God.
Carter and Rodney are startled. McKay looks at his computer. McKay and Carter exchange looks.
Have you noticed this? That they are still infected because the ZPM still got the ZPM's. That was McKay, by the way. Carter. Well, this is sickening considering the computer buffer systems takedown. The buffer center. What the hell? The buffer.
You want the technobabble?
Wow, you got it. This is Carter. She, of course, screwed it up. Poor Carter. Well, this is sickening considering the computer buffer systems takedown. The buffer center-iterating out the frequency modulate. McKay, looking puzzled. No, I didn't really say that. McKay, we've been walking around in circles for hours. Carter, yeah.
They are startled. Cut to int Atlantis gate room. The Stargate activates.
I just got to say, this is my favorite one that the AI came up with this one. Okay, this is McKay. Oh, come on! Carter, I'm not sure we should have another look at it. McKay, I know what you're going to say. Oh, no. Intuition. I swear, I tried to fix the ancient device.
He looks at her.
I'm sorry, but you're just... He wasn't Feld's work. Carter, what is it?
The door opens and a medical technician in full hazmat gear enters. Carter looks at him.
Carter. Dad?
End.
See, boy, apart from Carter screwing up her lines, that was... This the thing that really blows me away is that it's actually got my stutter in it. You don't... AI, you don't have to write that. I screwed that up on my own.
That's the whole sequence to sequence thing. So like if the line with the stutter was captured, then there's a sequence with McKay going it or something along those lines. But one of the interesting things in this one was like it came up with new words, right? Like centenerating and smallerizating.
Smallerizaation, I love that. Quick, get the smallerizaation beam.
I think they made a movie about that, didn't they?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So,
Doctor Who. Yeah.
Honey, I smallerize the kids.
Yeah,
that's the one. So like how this like has been working is that with the language of the words, we actually break it down into subwords. And then so all of those subwords become tokens, and those tokens, when it's machine learning, in order to get sentiment, get mapped to numbers. And those numbers are like vectors in a high dimensional space. I think in this case, it's like a 7-dimensional space. Every word is a number, or every subword is a number pointing in that way. And then those numbers become a pattern that machine can learn. This pattern generates this pattern. So then when the generated pattern comes together, often those words become made up of new different subwords. Like, I don't know what centenerating came out of, but like it must be like an amalgamation of 2 or 3 words, or smallization, the same thing.
Like what is it? The entomology? I never get that right. One of them's bugs and one of them's words. About where they. Yeah, there you go. About where they get, like where it comes up with that, because that's kind of. I just assumed I was an idiot and didn't know whatever that was, but that's literally something that's come up with itself.
Yeah, so often if there's a lack of vocab, there's probably not a whole lot of McKay and Carter interacting in the show compared to, because Carter was primarily in SG-1, McKay was primarily in Atlantis. So often, like in that sequence to sequence, it's kind of coming up with, well, I want her to say this, or I want her to say something, but I don't have the word for it. And often that will throw out what's called an out of vocabulary token. But then sometimes when we're using subwords, it kind of like mushes 2 or 3 subwords together. Like, scent is probably a subword, and innerate maybe, or inner at, and then ing is another subword, and ends up like mushing the 3 of these together. So we get these. And
can you see the numbers that it's come up with? Like, I mean, can you see like how many scenes there are between McKay and another person, or like, could you see that data, or is that all sort of hidden within the breakdown?
No, you can see that data. Right now, this version that we were building this one with is just McKay responding to everybody. But one of the things I want to do, but I also want to refine it so that, like, okay, if McKay is chatting with Carter, let's build a model to see how McKay would respond to Carter. And then, if we feed some words to McKay, here's how he responds to everybody, here's how he responds to Carter. And then you can calculate a probability on both of these, and then maybe pick the one with the highest probability.
You've actually picked a hard one, because McKay's reactions with Carter's, I do think, are actually unique amongst the other. Wouldn't you say that, Brad? That there's like there's kind of a unique quality between those two. Whereas like between there was like Shepard and I, or Beckett and I, there's a certain sort of disdain in general about
I was just going to say that McKay was obviously madly jealous of Carter's mind, and also he crushed on her a little bit. Let's be honest.
Well, I strongly disagree, and and you've got a 5-second buffer, so there.
We have a bunch of guest questions. We have some guest questions.
Cool.
And we have some special guests, and we want to queue them up and play them for you. So why don't you do that, Tommy?
Okay, I have one question. I can't wait to see what the AI writes at this stage, but my question is, how far away do we think that we are to an AI writing something like really convincing? Will it ever be possible? And the bigger question is, are we going to replace actors?
No.
He was pretty buff, wasn't he? I feel intimidated.
I gotta get a better position for my mic, for my camera. Look at,
yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Or I could work out, I suppose. But
well, I think it's a great question, and I personally believe the answer to that is no. I don't think it can ever replace great writers. But what I do think we can do, and we're heading towards that, is to come up with tools that help great writers get better. And like if you think about like various like automation tools that have been out there, like in word processors, having spell checkers, right? Or having things that like check your grammar for you, that hasn't put editors out of a job. It's just helped people be better and be more efficient. And I think with something like this, I don't think we can ever replace a writer, but certainly during the ideation phase, or if a writer wants to test out some things, or maybe discovered like unconnected links between characters, that there's a whole there's a whole green field of tools there that I think can assist writers. And I think that's the things that we're beginning to see even crop up in this little experiment. And so that would be my answer to Michael's question about that one. And as far as replacing actors is concerned, that's not really like what like an AI thing can do, but you know, there's really great stuff being done with CGI. I don't know if you saw recently ABBA. Have you seen what they've been doing? That,
the
like,
ABBA Avatar thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that they're going to do a concert with like, you know, 3D CG characters, you know, of them when like what they looked like during the 70s. And it's not quite there yet. It still looks a little cartoony, but it's probably better than watching them kind of hobble across the stage in Zimmer frames. You know, I hope they don't mind me saying that. But so, yeah, and again, like I think there are always things out there with technology to enhance existing artists and make existing artists better. But you know, I'm very bullish on that type of thing rather than replacing.
There was a very cool technology that I saw where they were using AI to lip sync. So when you dubbed a movie, you could have it would actually move the lips in the right position. Which just like that kind of stuff is very cool to me. Although there's still an uncanny valley there that I catch on.
Yeah, actually, I was one of the models used for that with my YouTube videos for like if you do a machine translation into like some languages, and then overdub, you know, the actual speaker. And if you look at like the research papers that were posted, it was some of my videos were done where you overdubbed the actual speaker, but then instead of his lips moving in English, for example, in this case, it was in Spanish, they actually made my lips move as if I was speaking Spanish.
Wow. So why did we introduce you as a machine learning guy? We could have just introduced you as Google model.
That's me. I'm like the hand model now, or the mouth moving model, but it was kind of cool.
Before model.
But they definitely had the uncanny valley. There was like I call it rubber face kind of thing being done. So certainly advancements like that to be able to enhance an existing, like for example, maybe if you were to make a new Stargate show, but you wanted that in Spanish instead of overdubbing it, you know, the actors would now look like they're speaking Spanish or look like they're speaking other languages and that kind of thing, rather than replacing them. So
I much prefer that than replacing them. It's true.
Yeah. You can never replace you, David.
The problem with that is that you may change, and I've noticed that dialogue gets changed in order to fit the mouth, and it sometimes changes it completely compared to. So you're hearing, like if you ever watch something that is subtitled and dubbed at the same time, they're two completely different things because they're trying to fit the mouth, or they're trying to manipulate the mouth the easiest way. I hate that. The subtitles are what they said, and what that's best for me.
Or when they get it wrong, it drives me crazy.
Tommy, let's run another guess.
Hey everybody, greetings from Newfoundland. Brad, this sounds like a really exciting project, but I gotta ask, aren't you the least bit concerned about the AI gaining sentience and sending people back in time to alter the timeline? Because that's been known to happen.
That's obviously a Travelers reference. Eric is the star of Travelers. I didn't know he was going to do that. That's lovely that he did that. That's funny. I think we're a little ways away from that. Wouldn't you say, Laurence?
Well, get that time travel thing to work out.
Yeah. Beyond the time travel part as well, I have a saying that I'm much more afraid of biological ignorance than I am of machine intelligence. And, but yeah, I love the Travelers reference. Great show, Travelers. Love how AI is portrayed in that. Often like AI is a boogeyman in sci-fi shows and it's misunderstood. But in this case, it's a very interesting and unique angle that you took with Travelers. And I have to avoid spoilers because I've only gotten halfway through season 2 and I have to watch the rest. So.
Ultimately, it's AI as government. And that's a bit of a spoiler, but the show's been on for a long time, so I don't mind giving a little bit of a spoiler.
Oh, hi, David. I'm a big fan of yours. I live in Hamilton, Ontario. And I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, actually. I noticed that you've been working quite a bit more since turning the age of 65. And I wanted to know how that came to be and how that's going for you, because, it can be really hard working at such an advanced age. And then the other question I wanted to ask you was if there's anyone in your family who you really look up to, even someone who's maybe younger than you, quite a bit younger than you, someone who you find, their work really exciting and inspiring. Is there anyone in your family who inspires you, who's younger than you? Thank you.
I can't think of anyone. No, I draw a complete blank on that one. For some reason, I can't think of anyone younger than me who could inspire me. No. That was my real sister, which I have to explain to everybody, is actually my real sister. They're like, "Oh my God, you guys did you guys hate each other?" I was like, "Yeah, we hate each other. We're actually related." She's had a kid. Let's see an AI do that. And of course, she didn't ask anything on topic. Thank you, Kate.
We just have. I think we are at the point now where we want to start hearing some questions that have been asked by fans, and Tommy's going to put them up on the screen. Some of them are pre-submitted, and some of them are live.
Very good. All right. AI seems great for repetitive tasks. How good is it for creative tasks, like writing a Stargate script?
So it's a great question. And, I think it's really, as we were discussing earlier on, I think it's really good for assisting a real writer, or we can get to the point where it'll be really good for assisting a real writer, maybe with ideation, or maybe with dialogue, or maybe coming up with new words like we did here. But like I was saying earlier on, great writers don't kind of predict the future, they make the future on the page. And I think that's something that, something that's uses machine learning to learn from the past to kind of predict the future could never do. I know they say never, but I'm going to say never.
But you don't think there's a chance that they could analyze enough creative content to come up with creative content? Because isn't that what we do? Isn't that kind of what we do? We process as much as we possibly can, and then we start making those connections on our own.
But I think in addition to that, though, we come up with an idea for something new, and then we create that something new framed in the existing language. So, for example, if I were to pitch a new Stargate script to Brad, that kind of thing, I would have to come,
because everyone does all the time.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry, I won't. But if I were to do so, I would have to come up in my mind with a new and original story. I probably have an end where I wanted to go. I have a few turning points along the way. And then I would look to the past for inspiration, and how does McKay talk about a situation like this, and what was the name of the spaceship, and have they been to this planet before, and those kind of things to fill in the bones on the flesh. And I'm a terrible writer, but that's how I would do it. And I think a good writer will probably have an even better process than me. And that's where I would you can go back and you can analyze enough data and think you can come up with the patterns. But again, you're still just coming up with a pattern based on something historic, as opposed to creating something new and fresh. There's the old story that if you give an infinite number of monkeys an infinite number of typewriters, they could rewrite the works of Shakespeare. But the key word there is infinite, right? We can't use infinite. We can give a lot of monkeys a lot of typewriters, that kind of stuff. But with a lot of monkeys with a lot of typewriters would never come up with Shakespeare.
Right.
So if you think about, and so we tend to think in those terms when saying, oh, maybe an AI will be able to come up and replace somebody, but we don't have an infinite amount of data or an infinite amount of compute power. So we can't recreate Shakespeare or Stargate or anything like that. As well.
Oh, another one. Did the AI pick out any other words from Teal'c than indeed?
I'm going to have to defer the answer to that one to avoid potential spoilers.
Ooh, indeed.
Indeed. I tried to get him speaking Klingon, but he wouldn't.
Try to get him in a spacesuit. That's even harder. Oh, that's interesting. Can we try out the Stargate AI script bot?
So I'll say yes and no. No for the time being, because there's a lot more than one, because of all the different things for transitions that I was talking about earlier on. But yes, eventually, that the code that was used to create this, I will open source. So people, if you can get dialogue between you and your friends, and you want to kind of train a bot on that dialogue to respond the same way as maybe I've been doing with McKay dialogue or Carter dialogue, then I'm going to make that stuff available for people to use.
It'd be fun to do crossovers, like grab like
Yeah.
scripts from Stargate, grab scripts from Doctor Who, and put them all together and get them to do mashups and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to fudge the data to do that because we don't have McKay responding to any Doctor Who characters in his script.
Oh, I see. Right.
You know, that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's ways that maybe something like that could be done. So.
I want to say that the script that David just read is just a tease. We're going to do sometime in the fall, hopefully in October, a script with more cast members, and it will be more developed. And you know, Laurence has got more time, and so maybe just to answer the questions that's on the screen, an AI will learn a little bit about comedy between now and then.
That's got to be tough though too, because like I know a lot of humans that don't understand comedy.
I know it when I see it, but I can't analyze it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to know how does comedy work, right? A lot of it's in the delivery rather than in the words. So
I read somewhere, and I don't know whether this is true or not, that there was an AI that they're using for medical analysis that could look at like the heart rates or whatever it is, or like the actual sort of the patterns of heartbeats, and tell doctors who was going to be dead in like 20 years or something or not, based on what they they were just analyzing just purely just this, but the doctors have no sense of where it's coming from. Is that the sort of thing that can be happening with this stuff, or is that just
I don't know about that one specifically, but I can tell you one that blew my mind, and that was it's one research that we worked on. We're looking at people's retinas, and diabetic retinopathy is the leading cause of blindness globally, but it's actually easy to prevent if it's diagnosed early. So we worked to build a diabetic retinopathy project, and we had thousands of retina scans, and like those were labeled with various progresses of the disease, and that was really cool. But one day, one of the scientists at Google kind of was looking at this data of these retina scans, and as well as the disease, you know, the label of the disease, they had the age of the patient. And they were able to go, well, I can maybe look at these retinas and like I have the ages of these patients. Can I train a model to match retinas to ages? And they ended up doing that and training it. And by this model looking at an image of a retina could actually predict somebody's age to within 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, and I bet like anybody watching this stream now, if they were to guess my age or if they were to guess any of our ages and they see us talking, they're looking at a lot more than our retinas, I bet the average error would be off by more than 3 years. And so
certainly
like
with how young I look.
Oh, totally. And I mean, that previous fan, like, you know, how she got your age, she got it spot on.
Right on. Yeah.
You know, but so it's like, you know, things like that, so that there's patterns in data that, you know, we can't see as a human, but the computer was able to see in this case, and being able to come up with things like by looking at a retina to be able to determine somebody's age. That just, and so it's like when you get beyond like the human understanding of things and start seeing what's possible with these machines and how they can start like detecting patterns and things that we as a human don't actually see, that's when we can start making really new and interesting scientific discoveries around it. Well, I'm not familiar with the one you mentioned about the EKG, but that's the one that
I'm probably exaggerating it a bit too, but it was something like extraordinary that they got this. They basically could do like how, you know, how long people were going to live based on these very specific patterns. But I just think that's interesting though. So because these things are looking at things in a way that we don't, right? They're just not. They're seeing patterns that we'll never ever be able to see.
Yeah. Because I mean, like an eye doctor looking at a retina is probably looking for things like blood clots and shadows and that kind of thing, and then be able to determine the disease. But the computer doesn't have any of those biases built in. It's like saying, I see a whole bunch of pixels and this person's 43. I see a whole bunch of pixels, this person's 37. I'm like, can I match these pixels to these ages and come up with a formula that matches pixels to ages? And it did it with like a mean average error of like 3 years, which is just mind-blowing.
Wild. That is wild. Huh.
So, and then there's techniques that you can do to go backwards and then kind of say, okay, well, what was the computer looking at? It's called an attention model when it said this person's 35 and, you know, stuff like that.
And you would tweak that if you were seeing the wrong results.
Yeah. Or if I wanted to figure out what it was in the retina that determined that this person was in their 30s and what it was in their 40s, from the computer matching them out, I can do that backwards model to then look at and say, it was paying attention to this when it thought that person was in their 30s. So then I could go to an ophthalmologist and say, well, if you pay attention to this part, you might be able to determine the age as well.
Neat.
So the next question. So at what rate does this AI process the script data? I think when I was like the actual individual character models, I trained first of all, I pre-processed all the data. So I have one great big file that says, somebody said this to Rodney responded like this. And, that to go through all of the scripts and to generate that took a few seconds once the scripts were marked up in a way that was machine readable. So then training a model based off of that, it's up to me how long I train the model. It will get steadily more accurate the longer I train it. But in general, I think the model that was used in this script probably took about 2 hours to train. So it really wasn't that bad.
Wow.
I can maybe train it longer. And I found the longer I train it, the more likely it is to come up with weird words. And because it starts really, really analyzing the data a bit more. And, maybe I'll leave it to train for a few weeks and it'll just speak gibberish. I don't know. It's one of the things I'm going to experiment with. But in general, this can be done quite quickly.
Though. That happens with writers. You lock them away for too long, they start talking gibberish too.
So maybe we're closer to reality than we think.
That's it. Yeah. Bruce Norfolk says, Brad, do you think you will be using AI as a tool for your writing in the future?
I will use any tool given to me, writer. Laurence pointed out word processor changed everything for me because when I'm writing, when I'm writing dialogue, it changes 57 times before I get to the end of the scene. I'm constantly watching through it, constantly changing it. And if I were on a typewriter and committing it to the page, it would be a mess. It'd be X'd out. So I think of it as a tool. Spell check is a tool. I don't use grammatic software for screenwriting because characters don't speak with grammar that is perfect. And that sentence wasn't perfect either. But
there was a joke in there. You could have,
of course, use whatever tool. So yes is the short answer.
Cool.
Are you a gadget guy, Brad? Do you have are there things that you use? When new tools come up for writing, do you like try them out, or are you pretty set in the tools you use right now?
Well, one thing I love is document analysis, but that's just simple. That is which character says what, how much. Because sometimes you write a script and you'll think a character is at the center of it because emotionally they are, and but then you'll realize they have maybe the third most lines as opposed to the most lines because people are talking about them. It's the most words doesn't necessarily equate to the hero of the scene.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. I use what I have at hand.
Okay, what's the best sci-fi AI in your opinion, Robert?
Ooh.
Well, in films and stuff, I guess? Is that
okay? I'm going to name two that I really like. Okay. The first one, I'm not just saying this because Brad is here, but I really like the AI in Travelers.
I've got to watch this show, damn it.
It's really, but one of the things, and one of the reasons why I really like it, and I haven't said this to Brad yet, but one of the reasons why I really like it is a lot of when we're building AI and machine learning models, we're using data from the past to predict the future. But the idea that Brad did with the AI in Travelers turns that completely around, where it's using knowledge of the future to change the past. That kind of stuff, and using knowledge of the future to change the past in a beneficial way. So I really like that, because that kind of was an original twist on it. And so in movies or in entertainment, that was one of my favorites. And then the other one was the movie. I always get the name of it wrong. I think it was Her or She. It's one or the other.
That's what I was going to say. Her. Yeah.
It's the one with the Joker having Black Widow talking in his ear. Joaquin Phoenix with Scarlett Johansson speaking.
Yeah.
And I really love that one because it portrayed the AI character in a real and very genuine way. And the emotional hook in that story for me was, and the very realistic one was that she actually evolved away from him. She experienced time in a different way than he does. And, there was the one crisis part in the movie where he goes away camping for a week and he shuts her off, and then he comes back and she's like evolved a million years or whatever it is, and she's gone beyond him. And it's symbolic of a relationship growing apart. But from the technological perspective, it was really interesting that she's not necessarily bad, she's not necessarily evil, she's just different. And then she grew from him differently. And I thought that was really authentic. And that was a very, very original portrayal of AI in sci-fi. So Travelers, because of how Brad flipped it on its head. And is it her or is it she? I can't remember. It's her. It was
her.
Right?
Yeah.
Her. Okay. And my AirPod just fell out. But yeah, those two are my favorites. How about you guys?
I loved her. I thought her was on my list as well, just because I the same thing. I just couldn't get over how it completely sucked me in. Like I didn't question the technology. There was, other than some bad fashion sense, it didn't feel like a conceived future. It felt like a natural progression of this stuff. And you're seeing aspects of that in life now, where you're seeing people, pretending to marry virtual girls in around the world and stuff. There's a connection that people are making to these characters that I just thought was just so beautifully done in that. And then the other one for me was oh damn it, I've lost it now.
Travelers.
I got so excited about her, I forgot. Brad, you go. I'll think of it.
Okay. Probably the most famous one that you actually auditioned with, David, was Hal. And I love that, but not so much in 2001. In the sequel, there was one of my favorite scenes is when it is determined that Hal didn't go crazy on his own and isn't sociopathic, but was given conflicting programming and did not know how to respond to it. And there's a wonderful scene with Dr. Chandra, played by Bob Balaban. It was this amazing performance where he actually offers to stay with Hal. And that's one of my favorite AI scenes of all, because it's just so moving. He's like, do you want me to stay, Hal? And he says, no, you should go. And then continues to count down. And I loved that. It was one of the first times, to me, it felt like AI was represented as not anthropomorphized, but it considered a legitimate life. And yes, I know that isn't where AI is now, and I suspect it's possible, and certainly I suggested that in Travelers, that it's going to get over time to a level of sophistication far beyond where it is now, that it will be genuine superintelligence. Probably not within our lifetimes, but it's fun to think about.
The idea that it could truly become a companion to us is fascinating to me. I love that idea of like being, like you've always got a friend, I suppose. You've always got someone who's watching your back. I was thinking, the thing I was thinking of was that when I grew up, when I was growing up, I watched a show called The Tomorrow People, which is this god awful British television series, but I loved it because it was all about like teenagers rebelling against the world by becoming, superhumans. And they had this giant orb that would talk to them. And again, it was this sort of like this personal assistant before personal assistants. And I just loved this idea that there was this organization that was being completely just overseen by this fantastic intelligence that knew everything, that could let you know. It was almost like a way that people got, these Tomorrow People were able to have some access to tools and technology and information that nobody else would have at the time. So it's incredibly dated now when you see it, but I remember loving that as a kid. And it was good. It wasn't bad. That's the other thing. It wasn't an evil technology. It was,
Funny story, you were talking about earlier on when you were talking about her, when you were saying that people around the world are now like chatting and like having romance, like with like chatbots and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
As part of this project, one of the things, no spoilers, but there was one character that Brad asked me to investigate and to kind of build a model. And I built a model for this character. And the first thing, just to test the dialogue response out of this character, I asked, and it was a female character, and I asked, like, would you marry me or will you marry me? And the bot actually responded, I might. And I was like, oh my, hopefully we can use this one.
All right. Darren Duncan's got with the companion. To add realism in a story where an AI is a character, could it be written in a hybrid way so a real AI creates dialogue for the AI in the story, and the human writes the human dialogue? Huh. Well, you could do that live in a way, couldn't you? I mean, it would just have the AI respond to. That's interesting. Like a two-hander with an AI. Huh.
Interesting experiment. And I think, it depends on what and Brad, you can probably answer this far better than I, but it really depends on what the role of that AI character is in the story, right? And if you can train a model based on the data that AI character is trained on, then you can maybe potentially have a model, predict text for that.
Scenes have purpose. It's so I doubt the AI would respond in a way the writer or the other character would want it to respond. But it would, as you say, it would be a very interesting. I mean, you could certainly try it. I mean, you don't have to. We don't do these things live. I mean, we're doing this live, and we're experiencing all the foibles that come with live, with my delay. But you could certainly shoot something.
It's interesting though. If you gave it guidelines, though, like if you gave it guidelines of where you want that scene to end up, or give it give it its final line or something. I mean, could you give it something to how would you sort of corral it into sticking with a story?
Funny that you ask that, because that's one of the things that we're working on, hopefully, for the final versions of the script for this one. And, with this model that we're building, we're starting with a blank page and predicting words going forward. But there's no reason why you couldn't start with the final scene and predict the words going backwards. Right? So like maybe the prompt at the end is, gate room explodes and they all die, that kind of stuff. And it's like, what would be the words that precede? No, we won't do that one. But that's why I want to pick a ridiculous one. But what would be the words that precede that? Right. And then the fun becomes like, okay, you've got this one model with the closing of the scene and this one model with the opening of the scene. And one's moving back and the other's moving forward. And how do you make them kind of meet each other in the middle? And then the idea behind that is earlier on, I was talking about words and sentiment. I like these vectors in higher dimensional space. So like a sentence can be then a summarization of those vectors. And there's a tooling out there, a common tool called the Universal Sentence Encoder, which basically it's a way of evaluating the gist of a sentence. So you could, as these models are predicting the text, one going forward and one going backwards, to say, well, the gist of this sentence is here and the gist of this sentence is here. And like after this, I now have 3 options for the next sentence. Well, this one's heading in the right direction. And now after this, I have 3 options for the next sentence and this one's heading in the right direction. And then sooner or later, they would meet in the middle. Pretty sophisticated stuff. It's theoretically possible, but I haven't tried it out yet. With the scripts that we've been doing now, we're just moving forward into the unknown and ending on like a cliffhanger like we did on this script.
I love that it came up with that. That's fantastic. I don't know where they're going to go after that. Dad, then what?
It was one of the things I loved in it was also that if you look at McKay says the word infected, and then Carter says the word sickening. And then a person in a hazmat suit walks in, right? So like the DNA
for patterns.
Yeah, so it's like, but it's like, I was talking about words have vectors in this higher dimensional space. So then similar words tend to cluster together. So to me, it's like words like infection and sickening are probably clustering in a similar kind of direction. And then hazmat is clustering in that direction. And as a result, you're beginning already to get the words that are being generated using the gist of previous ones, but it's getting them to go to a final destination is the interesting part.
Well, that does kind of make sense too, doesn't it? Where it starts with something benign and moves to something, it starts and it escalates, because all the scripts always seem to escalate. To the very nature of television, you've got to sort of escalate the problem, and then that's neat. That's very neat. What's been the best surprise on the project so far? Obviously working with me, but other than that, I'm guessing.
Oh, your auditions, definitely. For me,
surprise. The guy's an idiot.
No. You've been amazing. For me personally, the biggest surprise has been some of the things like that cliffhanger. That we tend to call that emergent behavior, where it's a case of it's mathematical model producing something, but then when we're reading it, ascribe like, oh wow, it was smart enough to come up with a cliffhanger.
Okay, it really was. You got to come up with better terms. You got to come up with better terms. That emergent behavior is like, you want to freak people out. Use words like emergent behavior. You got to come up with like cute, cuddly terms for these things.
Okay, it was teddy bear behavior, and, and so it's like things like that. It's like, the intellectual in me who knows this stuff is kind of going like, that's just a mathematical model coming up. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, for me, it's the making up of words. I mean, Shakespeare made up words. That's astounding to me that the AI, the models that you've come up with, is already combining words that are actually, there's some sense to them. They're not gibberish. There's like David was saying earlier, there's etymology behind them that makes sense, and I think that's very cool.
Cool.
For me, what surprised me the most was that it actually started to get a cadence. It actually started to get McKay's rhythm or lack of rhythm in his speaking. You know what I mean? That it broke up the sentences into little sort of half-finished things. I thought that was kind of cool, because that's a character thing. Like that's truly character. That's not like that to me indicates that it's actually managed to pull something from it. Yeah.
Well, guys, we've gone a little long, but I want to say I'm really looking forward to what Laurence's AI cluster comes up with, and I'm looking forward to adding to the cast that is already, that David would say is,
you don't really need to, but sure.
I'm looking forward very much. I'm looking forward to doing to seeing slightly some meatier scenes and with the characters and seeing where this takes us. I know that this scene just scratched the surface, and I know Laurence has suggested that there's still a ways to go, but I think it's going to be very exciting, and I could not be happier with how our little science experiment is unfolding. So thank you both guys for participating in this. I apologize for my primitive, I don't know what's causing the lag. I'm just blaming myself. I'm at my cottage. Maybe that's it. I'm far away. Maybe the signal is going around the earth the other way, and instead of directly. But I'm really looking forward to this, and I think you guys are. I love your enthusiasm for this project, and thank you so much to the Companion for hosting this and for having us. And
thanks for putting this together.
They'll be the platform. It's great fun, and I hope the fans enjoy it, and I look forward to chatting with you guys again real soon.
Indeed.
Oh,
indeed. There you go. See?
Indeed. Yeah. Oh, come on.
Come on. It's over. Yeah, there you go. That's it.
And thanks so much, Brad. And,
come on.
And watch out for that small-ization.
Yeah. There you go.
So, thanks so much. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, this is really cool, I got to say.